The professional scene has previously been an echo chamber of saying that we need more NA talent, right? And this reaction was against the import rules that were implemented by Riot that happened in Season 4 and then was later amended in Season 6 by moving the residency requirement from 2 years to 4 years. So it was suddenly that these players that might be eligible for residency were no longer available to do that, aka the sad story of Rush on Cloud9. Now, the problem has been a magnitude of things which begins at the player pool. I did an article, which I'll link down below in the description, a while ago, which outlines the basic idea of Dardoch being so highly prized in Season 7 due to being a NA resident. Now, this was heavily in regard to the player pool of NA just being significantly smaller than any other major region within the League of Legends scene, which is still true today. And as a side tangent, most of this was also in disagreement with Kelsey Moser's opinion on NA having a perfectly fine pool of talent, which I still disagree with fundamentally because it's just statistically wrong. Now, the challenger ladder, when you look at the top of the ladder, and how many names are filled with it and so on and so forth, you see a repetition of the same people within the ladder. And that is to say that it's filled with either streamers who don't want to become professional players because, well, hell, they make more money doing streaming than they do playing in LCS, at least currently. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some debate for that right now as salaries have been rising, but historically it's been true. And that also goes with the idea of Smurfs. There are multiple different Smurfs in the Challenger ladder when it comes to simply professional players having Smurfs and also with the streamers having Smurfs. So now you have all these players taking up these different slots within the Challenger ladder. So you can see the problem in this in that it becomes like this conundrum to determine the actual skill of someone just based upon the ladder system itself, because now the ladder system is skewed. There is no hierarchy in rank when it comes to, you know, just basic top to bottom, because now you have all these people that are redundant items within the ladder, so it becomes more and more difficult to determine. Now, logically, what you should do is you should just take all these Smurfs and all these professional players that are already pros and just take those off your numbers list or your statistics and then go down from there. But there is something that seems to be entrenched in people's psychological aspect of just looking at the numbers and seeing, oh, you're, 150th rank on Challenger, and that is not so impressive as the first in Challenger, and yet they're still below a good number of the streamers who just play solo queue and that's it. And they were already good in the beginning anyways because they were former players, professional players, or you have these other professional players in all of their Smurfs. So it just numerically doesn't look as impressive. And so that's what I think is a small problem, at least psychologically, when it comes to scouting and when it comes to just looking at the ladder and just picking off names from it. Now, there's another idea, which also is relation to the ladder, which is that NA has this culture that has perpetuated a negative attitude towards the importance of solo queue. Now, you've heard time and time again that these pros or even streamers don't value the practice of solo queue because they just think it's filled with a whole bunch of streamers, which is partially true. that are at the highest level that don't take the game seriously. And so therefore you keep running into these streamers or these people on their Smurfs, which they also don't care about their elo on the Smurfs. And so you just get this kind of coalesced idea that the NA ladder doesn't mean anything and that solo queue doesn't mean anything. And so this has been kind of like propelled throughout time within NA solo queue, and so hence we find Korean solo queue more important or more indicative to skill rather than North American solo queue. And then same thing with Europe, we find Europe even more valuable than NA. So that's the whole problem with the solo queue ladder, at least in that perspective, and why we have such a hard time figuring out our own player pool, because it's filled with all these nuances of just the ladder problem itself. Then you have the problem of gambling on unproven players, because when you're a top team, you don't need to gamble on these players. You don't need to get new, fresh rookies in order to spice up your lineup and possibly topple over any of the other top orgs, because you're already a top org. You're already TSM. You're already Cloud9, and I mean, to an extent, CLG before. So I don't know, maybe they should start looking at that. But so you're already these orgs. You already have a recipe to win the game. So there's no need for you to look towards other new players. So that's always been a problem that has plagued the upper portions of the league. And then you also have a problem of that scouting is just really bad in NA. And this has been a problem more specifically because our scouting has started, it had to start early, of course, but with season 1 and everything, but that was just simply people getting together and creating their own team because they were friends or whatever, hence TSM and CLG. And then after that phase, you do get into trying to at least look for people that are good, right? But it's still on the solo queue ladder, and it's simply just who was cool and who was high rank. That's really about it. So you only get into the crux of looking for actual talent in a statistical or analytical way in season 3. Well, so season 3 into season 4, well, now you have the residency rule that comes into play in season 4. So everyone realized that Koreans were starting to ramp up within about the middle of season 3. So now you're trying to get these imports of Korean players, and then suddenly you're hit with the import rule. So it's only really during season 4 where you have to start looking for these NA talent and up-and-coming players, right? But you already have a lot of the old guard. And so there's been only recently been a surge of upcoming talent, but that's out of late necessity since we've only needed it from season 4 and onwards. And then you have a team that I'd like to talk about specifically, which is Team Liquid, as they've been 4th for pretty much their entire existence, right? Besides this last split. And it's not very much of a meme. It's just kind of true. So there's only a slight risk for this team to get rookie talent. It's like, yeah, they aren't in the top 3. They're almost there. But what can give them an edge to get into the top 3 teams? Well, it's with looking for new and upcoming talent. So Team Liquid has been the only consistent org to find and develop new talent, because they're looking for that recipe for success, the recipe to win games and to find a new star player to take over the game. And infrastructure has only just started to be heavily invested in. And that may be a reason why Team Liquid was the only team to be successful at scouting previously, because they were a team that had a lot of infrastructure before all these other teams. Because, they had a great sponsorship with Team Curse, and they were able to get actual good revenue and everything. And same thing with TSM and CLG and Cloud9. So they're all this old guard party, which had the infrastructure available. But the difference between these teams is that Team Liquid is fourth, while the rest are in the top three. So, like I said, they don't have to look for new talent. So, this is the difference between Team Liquid and all the other teams. And that is also why, when you look at the players that they have developed, their list is incredible. They have had some of the top talent within that team that has shifted to different orgs, and they pretty much developed every great player within the scene currently. Now you go to the final point of why basically we haven't gotten talent or anything, and that's because, well, franchise has only existed in for a split. It's only been this year that franchising has existed. So when you think of franchising's whole purpose, it's to kind of stop relegation. It's to allow these teams time to invest within their organization and within their team to create long-term strategies. Well, fear of relegation's prevented long-term strategy, and it's kind of kept the old guard players within the LCS. And that was also my point within the Dardoch article, was that, well, you have players like Dardoch, or at least previously Dardoch was extremely toxic, and I don't think he was great for the LCS environment. I think he honestly shouldn't have been given another chance after all the teams that he failed through. Now maybe he's turned a new leaf, I don't know, we'll see. It's been a split, but my point being that Dardoch had this inherent value because he was an NA player and he is very good at the game, right? So the fear of relegations has kept him within this system and has gotten him to the point of where he is now, to where he has a choice, either reform or sink. And with franchising, teams can kind of take less shit from the star players because you can always just get this new talent, and you can risk that because you don't have the fear of relegation. So it's not like you're going to lose your entire organization off of this one move. No, it's going to take multiple splits over. So you don't have to have you don't have to be gripped by the balls from this star player that is super toxic. That doesn't exist anymore. So now these old guard players have to step up in that regard. They have to play better in order to kind of show their worth. Now there's an influx of orgs wanting NA talent. And with the creation of academy teams, it's allowed for more teams to utilize the potential of these rookies, or more so to realize the potential of these rookies as well too. Because before, with challenger teams, yeah, sure, some orgs did have their own sister teams or their own challenger teams, but a lot of orgs didn't, because they just didn't feel like it was a great investment. And so they would simply wait for the top team or the top two teams to finish and then select from those players. Well, now every player has a chance to show their worth. Every player is attached to an org and is closely related to the actual LCS players to have more opportunities to show exactly what they're worth. And that's especially true with substitutions too. Now, you also have the value of in-scrim housing, or in-house scrims. And it puts an emphasis on academy teams to perform at a serviceable level for the practice of the LCS teams. Because if you have a shit academy team, it's not going to do you any good to have in-house scrims, because it's going to be inaccurate data, right? You could have this pocket pick that you've been kind of practicing in solo queue, and then you move it over into scrims and you want to bust it out on the LCS stage. Well, it's not going to matter if you play this against a shitty, challenger mid laner or whatever, and he performs terribly, and so it's not worthy practice if he just keeps getting smashed in lane over and over again, because you aren't able to judge whether it's a good pick or not, because they're just inherently a bad player, right? So With that said, now these academy teams have to kind of level up the ante. They have to be good players, and so you have to develop them into good players, into making the in-house scrims meaningful. So I think the gold rush for NA talent is near, and we are actually just in the beginning of it, and we just have the infrastructure to be able to do this. And we have the scouting, which is still at a level which I think is bad, but at least we're trying to work on this problem. You know, Korea has years ahead of us in terms of scouting. I mean, they've been doing this since the StarCraft days. So obviously they have quite a bit of years ahead of us in terms of actual scouting, and we just kind of began this with season 4. So we have a lot of catching up to do, but it's not too late to start now, and so that's why I think there are going to be a lot of owners and a lot of scouters that are in the realm of looking towards NA talent. And I do think we will see an influx of new rookies coming into the scene. And I think it'll be good. But also, that is not to say that just because we get this new NA talent, that means that we have to kick out the old guard players. It's only if they perform at a bad level. And if you can't keep up, then you shouldn't deserve to be within the scene only based upon pedigree, because pedigree only gets you so far, accolades only get you so far until you just come up short when it comes to the big play that is current and that is live.